welcome to our channel, Those Twins Who Knit. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Rachel.
And this is our space where we like to talk about all the things that we've been knitting, and we occasionally talk about some other things that we're working on too. So I think today we've got just a couple of sewing projects that we'll mention at the end as well. If you were with us last time, it's been about 3 weeks since we podcasted last, which I think is our preferred time because I feel like we have quite a bit to show after 3 weeks, so we're excited to get into all of that. I thought I'd start with what I'm wearing because it's probably the most familiar of what we have right now. I feel like I've talked about this sweater so much that I'm a little bit ready to stop talking about it, but also very excited to show it. I am wearing the Cove sweater by the Knit Purl Girl, and I've talked about it a lot because in our winter planning, I talked about wanting to make a swan sweater, and it's finally done, so that feels really good. Just to go into a little bit about the sweater, the yarn I used was Knitting for Olive Merino held double to get a DK, and Soft Silk Mohair held with it. So I used 3 strands from Knitting for Olive in the color navy, which somebody asked why we sometimes do that instead of the heavy merino. And you brought up a good point about how it's easier to get a DK gauge versus the heavy merino sometimes gives more of a close to worsted. Yeah, so with the heavy merino, sometimes getting a worsted gauge, I think adding a strand of mohair to it, for me and the gauge that I typically get, would make that more of like an Aran weight. And so I've just had better luck combining the 2 fingerings to have a DK plus the lace. And to me, that usually equals like a pretty true worsted gauge. I've just had better luck with that. Well, I've also found just on a preference that sometimes the merino has more color options than the heavy merino. So sometimes if I'm really specific about a color, I'll kind of manipulate it by doubling it up to get what I want out of it instead of trying to make the heavy merino work. I don't know. I've also found, this is just my experience, that I've not had any problems with the merino pilling at all, and the heavy merino hasn't pilled bad either. I haven't had issues with it pilling.
Yeah, but I feel like the merino holds up just like a tiny bit better. So, just a preference. But I already talked about the making of this sweater last time because I wore it as a finished object without the swans. And so I wanted to share it again with the duplicate stitch, which was so fun. It was really a good experience. I had never duplicate stitched before. But I will say that it took a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah, I think you thought you were going to do it in an afternoon, and then you texted, you were like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
It was like 3 days later, I'm still stitching these little swans. It took so long, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I feel like it's kind of silly, whimsical, like it's not a very
but it's
serious
still classic, you know.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun that I started the new year with this very fun make, and it was also fun to try to take something that I'd seen in stores and recreate it, because I think that is something that we're not like going to be super invested on, but want to explore a little bit, is the idea of like recreating pieces and not just, I don't know, going off of patterns, but also being able to have some creativity with it and be inspired by everything.
Knitter has like a folder of store-bought sweaters that they're like, oh, I could make that, so you never buy them. But then we haven't been good about actually making those things that we were intrigued by. So I have a sweater that's kind of similar to that I'll talk about when we get to our whips.
Yeah, just the idea of being able to pull inspiration from a lot of places, I think. So this was really fun. And the sweater, I've said it several times now, but this sweater was inspired by a sweater I saw from a store called Lisa Says Ga. And I originally wanted it to be a Christmas sweater, but I did not finish it in time. So now it has been finished for Valentine's Day.
It'll be a good Valentine's Day sweater.
I'm going to wear it for Valentine's this year, so that's been really fun.
Today I'm wearing the Seaway Pullover by Ozetta, and I knit this in Alpaca Soft DK by Rowan. And I got this yarn on sale during the Kansas City yarn crawl last fall. I found a really good deal on this yarn. So it's one that I don't know that I would have purchased on my own because it would have been quite expensive. But now that I've knit a sweater with it and know how much I love it, I'm definitely going to have to come back to this because it's so soft. It is starting to pill after only like a couple of wears, which is not ideal, but I think it'll be worth it because it really is just so soft. Like, this is one of the few sweaters that I don't think I need to wear anything underneath. I am wearing a t-shirt today, but like I think I could get away without wearing anything and I would be totally fine. So I really, really enjoyed working with this yarn. I really like wearing it. And I'm really happy with how the pattern itself turned out. The only thing that I modified in this pattern is that in the original pattern, you just do like the ribbing and then you go up and cast off. So it's just like a single layer. And I just got a little nervous. I saw a few people online where there's like maybe pointed out in weird directions or like stood up in the back a little bit. And I really didn't want that for my sweater. So I decided to just do a folded collar. So I knit almost as long as she recommended for the mock neck. I think I cropped it by maybe a centimeter or centimeter and a half, but then I just did the folded collar. So I'm glad that I made that. I think it feels a little more true to the sweaters that I typically grab for every day.
I personally think that that color is perfect. I've been really into dark browns, as you'll see here in a minute, but it's like a perfect in between brown and gray. It doesn't lean too much one or the other. It's really nice in between.
Yeah. It's definitely like a cold brown, I think, but I really like it. I think it's called classic dark brown or something like that. I'll put it in the description to be sure, but from certain angles, especially far away, it looks like it could be even like a charcoal. Yeah, like it looks very dark, but it is brown.
My other finished object for right now is my Sophie shawl / scarf, so I'll explain that. And I made it with Moondrake Fibers Cormo Sport and Fuwa in the color Baby Rose. I just thought this was such a fun color that I wouldn't normally gravitate towards, and when I was really feeling inspired by it, I just was like, this is a good opportunity to get some color, and when inspiration strikes, sometimes you gotta go with it. So I'm really happy with this color. I think it looks really cute with my coat, and I'll explain why it's kind of both a scarf and a shawl, which is that the gauge that I got with the Sport and the Fuwa was bigger than the shawl gauge that she recommends. I don't remember exactly how much, but it was pretty significantly bigger. It's still not super chunky. Like, I'll hold it up. It doesn't read as like a super bulky weight or anything like that, but you can tell it's just at a larger gauge. And so for the shawl pattern, PetiteKnit recommends a certain amount of increases, but for the scarf, she recommends a different rate that is a little bit slower. So the shawl ends up being a little bit wider, but because my gauge was so big, when I was able to do the rate of increases for the scarf, it still was getting pretty wide because of that big gauge. And so I followed the scarf pattern to create the look of the Sophie shawl. I do own both of the patterns, and I know that some people are like, this is such a simple pattern, you don't necessarily need to buy both, which I would agree with, but I just thought I would share that so that way I could really truly say that I was following the scarf pattern, but just increased it quite a bit more than she recommends, and then, you know, ended up with a longer and bigger scarf based on what my gauge was. So really like it. It's a very fun, just kind of mindless, simple pattern that if you need a little palette cleanser or anything like that, I think everybody and their mother has made this at some point, including us, and our mom really likes the Sophie shawl and scarf too. So I don't know if there's a whole lot more I can add to that conversation, but it was a really fun knit to start the year with.
I have one other finished object, and that is the Lotus Lake socks, and I believe the designer's name is Anniina Juuti. It'll be in the description in case I pronounced that wrong, but she was so kind earlier last year and reached out and offered to gift me this pattern. And so it's been in my Ravelry queue, my non-existent Ravelry queue, my queue of projects that in my head I knew I wanted to get to eventually, and I finally got around to knitting them. And so I used Coast to Coast Classic Sock in the color Galette, which was from the Fantasy Coffee House collection. See if I can hold these up so that you can see some of the detail in the lace, but the very top part is like a little lace motif, and then from there it goes into a 3x1 ribbing for the rest of the sock, which made it a perfect amount of like engaging but kind of mindless at the same time. And then for the heel part, I just followed my normal gusset and heel flap recipe that I use for most socks. So they were really fun, really easy. I love the color. I just think they're really sweet and cute, and they'll be perfect for springtime coming up.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna copy you.
Do it.
I have that same skein that I've started several times and just haven't found the perfect pattern to match with it. And I feel like that was a very good match from like what the pattern design is and what color you used. I don't know how to explain that, but sometimes you can just tell when colors match a pattern really well, and I think you did a good job there.
Thank you.
So our first work in progress we'll talk about together because it is the same one, which is the Stornoway sweater by Coco More Knits, and we are doing a knit along with Young Folk Knits about it.
Yeah, so it's been super fun to get to know Casey on Instagram and chat with her and come up with a knit along idea together. So if anyone is also making the Stornoway, we would love to see it on Instagram and Ravelry. And the hashtag that we're using is the hashtag Stornoway Sweater Squad. So we'll put somewhere on the screen a little bit more information about the knit along in case you would like to join us. It's very chill. It's going from January 15th through March 15th, but you don't have to finish it by then. Cast-ons or whips are perfectly acceptable. And if you'd already been working on this pattern and want to join the knit along together, you're welcome to do that too. It doesn't have to be like intentionally for this knit along that you're making that, but it's been super fun to see all the sweater squad pictures and get to chat to people about how their experience is going with knitting this pattern.
Yeah. I don't think that I had even started this last time we podcasted. You had done a swatch, and maybe I was still waiting on my yarn. We hadn't started yet, right?
I think I'd done the yoke.
Really?
I think so.
Because the reason I ask is because I didn't have anybody reach out to me, and I was a little bit surprised about that. I had a little bit of a not confusing time, but I paused for a minute and was like, wait, what do I want to do here? Because it has you start with one color, knit with the contrast, and then go back to the main color. And I was like, do I strand it? Do I cut the yarn? Do I do intarsia? And so I ended up doing intarsia for these couple, it's only like, I don't know, 6 or 12 rows that you do it for here. But I just kind of thought it was funny because I did have a little pause at the very beginning of, wait, what should I do?
Maybe I hadn't started it yet because I had that same thought.
Yeah, I don't think that you did.
And I was also kind of surprised when working the yoke. I thought that I would be able, I have like a billion ends, as you can
Me
see.
too.
I thought I would be able to like carry the yarn down one of the sides, but because all of these chunks, like the stripes and then this like chunk of texture is all odd numbers, when you're working flat, you end up on the opposite side of your knitting from where the last color was. So you end up having to cut the yarn between every single stripe, at least for the yoke. And then once you connect in the round, you can start just carrying the yarn down that way, which saves a little bit of yarn. But yeah, I have like a billion ends on each side.
Me too. Yours are longer than mine though. You must leave really long tails.
I probably do.
I was a little bit nervous. I don't think that I'm going to be playing yarn chicken, but I don't think I'll have a lot of extra. So I tried to leave them pretty short. Yeah. Also, this is going to be a great observation of the blocking process because yours is blocked and mine is not.
Yeah, and you can see the the size difference. It grows a lot when blocking because the stripes get all stretched out.
Yeah, you can definitely just tell.
It grows a lot. We are using the same yarn, just different colors. So we're both using 2 strands of merino by Knitting for Olive held together with 1 strand of the silk mohair. And the colors that I'm using are Trenchcoat for the beige color and then red currant for the stripes.
And I'm using brown bear for the main color and cream for the stripes.
Nice. I will say one thing that I've noticed about this pattern too, and this is purely personal preference, it's nothing wrong with the pattern at all, but it's not charted. And I was really hoping that it would be charted because I found that since it's entirely written out in text, it's a pretty long pattern. I don't remember how many pages it is, but it's like 10 plus pages. And every page just looks like a big wall of text. And so I'm the type of person, like, I keep my patterns usually on my phone, and I'll just like go through like screenshots of patterns that I keep in my camera roll app. And every time I have to pick this up, I have to go through like every single page to be like, where was I? Because they like all the pages in my phone look the same, and they all just like, they look like big chunks of text. And so I feel like I have to read so much to figure out where I am. So kind of a just a personal preference, but I do wish that this pattern had been charted, or at the very least that the labels of where you are in the pattern were like much bigger and bolder, so that it would be easier for me to find like body very quickly, instead of having to go through and be like, okay, I've done the left front, I've done the right front, I've already connected it, like I feel like I'm having to like scroll a lot. And maybe if you're a printed pattern person, that would not be a problem, but I don't own a printer, so yeah, it is what it is. But it is a really well written pattern. I haven't run into any issues like understanding or anything like that. That's been nice. Like I said, just pure personal preference.
I have found that this pattern is super potato chippy.
Yes.
Because even when you're in the bigger chunks, the main color, there's still like certain amount of rows, purl, then you do another stitch pattern, then back to purls, and then stripes, and it's just every little bit you're changing what you're doing. And so it is very easy to sit there and be like, okay, just a few more rows and I'm doing something different. Oh, okay, now a couple more rows and I'm doing something different. And it's very like motivating of wanting to get it done. And so I actually kind of made myself pause a little bit on this, because I was like, I don't want to finish it too fast. I want to enjoy the knit along and get to make it I don't know, along with other people. I don't want to rush through the process, but it is one that's so easy to pick up and just do a couple rows and really have a lot of fun with it. So I really enjoy it. I'm excited for it. While we are talking about this project, I did think I would mention a little yarn experience that I had, just because, I don't know, it was a little bit different, but nothing major, which is that we are using Knitting for Olive. And if you've been on this channel at all, you know that we are pretty big fans, that we use Knitting for Olive quite a bit in our knitting. I feel like I've been using it a lot recently. And so I order usually directly from the website and usually have really great experiences with that. And I had mentioned in the last episode that it was taking a lot longer than normal, which is okay, but it just was not my usual experience with them. It was probably about 3 weeks when I reached out and was like, hey, has my yarn shipped? And so it was able to get resolved. I got my yarn and everything, but when it came in, it was not in great condition. And I'll share, I don't know if it'll show too well on camera. I also got some footage where when I opened the bag, it looked like it had already been ripped, and you can tell where some of the brown got into the white, and it was actually wet and smelled kind of weird, which was not a normal experience. But I don't think this was Knitting for Olive by any means. I think it was probably a postal service issue, where maybe somewhere along the transportation the bag had gotten ripped, and with weather and all the stuff that was going on at the time, I imagine.
But it wasn't double bagged, so
yeah,
when the outside ripped, it just got exposed.
Yes. So I didn't reach out or anything. I didn't feel like it was Knitting for Olive's fault, and I didn't want to make them replace it for something that it was really out of their control. And I also didn't want to waste the yarn. So what I've been doing is pulling from the inside of the skeins, so that way the outside part where you can tell the brown bled into it and it got kind of dirty is not used, which I'm hoping I'll have enough that I won't need to like go to the outside. But if not, I think you have an extra skein of this color. But just kind of different. I've never had to pull from the inside for this yarn before, but I think that it's working pretty well. I don't think you see it in the sweater.
And I've got kind of shame though that like at least a chunk of it's gonna go to waste, because it's been
but like, better than like the whole skein.
Spots of it,
Yeah, I would much rather get to use what I can out of it. I didn't want to waste the yarn. So, but I have these little flat mushy yarn balls now that I've been knitting with. So just a different experience I thought I would share. It's not the end of the world by any means, but just, you know, part of it.
Still disappointing.
Yeah.
So similar to what you were talking about where you found a sweater online that you really liked and decided to recreate it, I found a sweater on a website called Christy Dawn that I just fell in love with and thought it was really cute and had that same moment where I was like, oh, I could make that. So that's what I'm attempting to do, is attempting to basically recreate a sweater that I saw online. And so I'll put a picture here of the inspiration photo, and then I'll hold up what I've done so far. I'm doing it top or bottom up, so it looks super wonky right now.
Do you need me to hold any pieces?
Maybe. Actually, if you want to hold this one.
Yes.
This is the body. It looks really short, but the pattern that I'm using is the Klippe sweater by Lars. And I've made that sweater a couple of times before, so I feel pretty good about the way that it fits and everything. But I basically took all of the numbers from that chart or from that pattern, and I recharted them in order to be like inspired by this Christy Dawn sweater. It's not going to be exact. I didn't sit there too closely, and like I wasn't able to get like every stitch exact. So it's more of inspired by, it's not an exact recreation, but I think it fits the vibe really well. So I finished.
Can I do a close-up of it?
Yeah. I finished this body.
It looks a little short, but you said you've made this before, so.
Yes, the body is short, but the yoke is long.
Okay.
So it works out. And I can also put a picture or a little video of me wearing like a previous version of this sweater that I've knit, just for reference, but it has a pretty good oversized yoke. And then, yeah, the body is pretty short. And the sleeves on the original sweater start out kind of small and then taper to get bigger. But with this chart pattern, I couldn't really figure out a good way to do that to make the inside of the sleeve look good. And so what I did is I cast on the same number of stitches that were in the cuff pattern, but then I increased in order to get it to the like total number of stitches that you would have at the top. So it's more of a balloon sleeve. And because of that, I'm also cropping the sleeve by about 2 inches because normally it hits like right here-ish. But with it being a balloon sleeve, I'd rather it hit like right at my wrist, if that makes sense. So I finished one sleeve and I'll hold that up. You can see kind of the flower chart. It hasn't been blocked, so it's not perfect, but I think the vibe is there. And then I have just started the other sleeve.
Oh my gosh, it's so cute.
So I think it'll be really cute when they all come together and it'll look like a full sweater.
I love that. I'm so impressed you're doing your own color work.
Well, I don't think I would want to take this on as far as like trying to figure out the stitch count and the yoke and everything like that. But I think taking a sweater that I've already made before, I'm familiar with the pattern, and just recharting it to have 3 colors instead of the original 4 and having it be all across the body wasn't too bad. Knock on wood. I haven't done the yoke, and that's the part that I'm a little bit scared of. So we'll see how that goes. But so far I'm really liking it. And I think I forgot to talk about the yarn that I'm using, but I am using Vintage Decay by Berroco. So it is a wool and acrylic blend, which makes it a pretty affordable yarn. I didn't want to invest a ton of money in this sweater in case this is a complete fail, since I'm kind of going rogue a little bit. And also this is the yarn that I've made my first 2 sweaters, my Klippe sweaters out of. And I find that I wear those sweaters all the time. They're super comfortable. They're easy to take care of. They haven't pilled. So I thought it would be a good choice to continue doing that for my 3rd version of this sweater too.
It's beautiful. The other work in progress that I have started on is my Dagmar jacket, which I talked about wanting to make in winter plans as well. So I'm feeling really proud that I've gone back to that a little bit. I feel like I got away from our plans a tiny bit.
I feel like I definitely got away from ours.
I would say I'm 50-50. Like half of the things I've made recently have been aligned with it and half have been not. But this one is. So very excited for that. Let me go back and make sure I've said everything about this pattern. This is the Dagmar jacket by PetiteKnit, and I am knitting it using Kelbor Woolen's Scout in the color Graphite Heather, and their mohair called Harmony in the color, I believe it's called Shawl, S-H-A-L-E. Shawl, is that how you would pronounce that? Hopefully. And I'm super excited to be working with this because I had bought this yarn earlier in the year, or last year I should say, and said that I wanted to make the Dagmar jacket, but that I probably wouldn't get gauge, so I have to get a mohair for it. And so Kelbor Woolens really kindly reached out and said, hey, we are launching a mohair very, very soon. Would you be interested in trying it? And I was like, absolutely. So it worked out really, really well. I have always loved Kelbor Woolen's yarn that we've used, and so having the mohair to go with it was really nice. They're not a perfect match, but they are so close. So when they blend together, I don't think you would ever know that they're not exactly the same color. It kind of gives it a little bit of like a heathering look to it. And if you're like, wow, those cables are looking really beautiful, it is because I have blocked this little chunk. I was just getting a little bit nervous that it was looking small, and so I went ahead and just pre-blocked it, and now I think it looks really big, even though the gauge is correct. I think the Dagmar jacket is just a big oversized,
it's pretty oversized
pattern.
Yeah.
And so I was almost like, ooh, should I play with the gauge and see if I could make it a little bit smaller? But I don't think I'm going to do that. I think it's going to be okay. And Casey from Young Folk Knits is also knitting on this, so it's been fun to talk to her about 2 different knits that we're making together. And I've seen, I think Morgan Unraveled has been making this, and just lots of people. I feel like a lot of people in the knitting community have gravitated towards this design. I think it's really fun to see PetiteKnit doing cables, and I know when she did the Moby sweater, people loved it. So
I definitely want to make it. I just like have other things that I'm getting through first, but I think it's a beautiful pattern.
I just finished I recently made the Billy pullover by Sari Nordland that has very similar cables, and I think I just really like the look of I think it's a honeycomb. Yeah. Really, really enjoy that look. So very excited to be working on this. It's been a really fun project, but I actually put it on pause because once it blocked, I was like, oh, it's so pretty. I should wait to do anything more with it until I can show it off a little bit. So I'll be excited to be working on this. I don't think it's going to be a fast project, but I like having it on my needles right now.
The last whip that I have going is the one that I've been working on this whole time, and it's pretty involved, so I feel like I'm having to like really stare at it. But I am making the cabled socks number 2, I believe is what they're called, by Augustine's DK. I'll try to hold it up to see if you can see some of the texture. Hopefully it's coming through. On the front it has this beautiful like smocked stitching, and then on the back it has these almost like faux cables that kind of look like a honeycomb, but they're actually made from doing like decreases and yarn overs in order to get that texture. And then I am getting a little bit of laddering in the back where there's a couple of purl stitches, but I don't think it's terrible, and it's in the back, so I'm hoping it'll block out, or at the very least, like, who looks at the back of your sock that much anyways. But I am really enjoying it. These socks are kind of an experiment right now. I'm using a yarn that I wouldn't typically use for socks. It's the Butterfly BFL by Dream and Color, and I believe the colorway is called Tumbleweed, so it doesn't have any nylon in it, so I'm not 100% sure that it's gonna hold up the best for socks. But the picture online that Augustine used, it looks like, or the designer Augustine's DK, it looked like hers had a little bit of like rusticness to the yarn, or a little bit of toothiness. It didn't look like a super smooth yarn, and so this is one that I've had in my stash forever, and I thought this would give a really similar look to the one that she uses in her like sample photos and everything. And plus I've been holding on to the yarn forever. I didn't know what to do with it, so I figure, you know, let's give it a try, see what happens. This sock also has texture on the bottom of the foot, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to love that or not. I think it makes for an absolute beautiful, like, finished object, and I think it's gonna look really cute, like aesthetically. I'm not 100% sure how much I'm going to love wearing it. But I could be wrong. You know, you don't know until you try. So we're giving it a shot. We're going to see what happens. I'm not going to like get my hopes up for these socks, but we'll see. They're so fun to knit. At the very least, this is such a good process knit because I have absolutely loved working on these socks. They just keep you so entertained between the like smocking stitch and the faux cables, and there are a couple of actual cables in here, so there's just always something going on, and I really love those types of knits. But we'll see how it turns out. The one thing that I have modified so far is her cuff is a double folded cuff, and I didn't know how I feel about that for socks, and so I did just do the normal cuff, and so I just knit for the recommended, or half the recommended length of what she said, and then I just didn't fold it. I went straight into the rest of the pattern.
I'm obsessed. I really want to make those.
I think they're going to be really cute, so I'll let you know how I actually like them, but like I said, it's like they're an experiment right now, and I think that's okay to just kind of have fun and see what happens.
What size needle are you using?
I'm using 2, and she does have several different sizes, so I'm using the size that has 68 stitches, which I believe is the 4th size.
I'm wondering if you could get away with a fingering and a mohair to create kind of a fuzzy texture.
Oh, maybe.
Just because I don't have any yarn like that in my stash.
Yeah.
Selfish reasons.
You'd have to, you would probably want to swatch for.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible.
I really like them. Well, my socks are not nearly as exciting as your socks, but I'll talk about them anyway. And I think that I was working on these last time we podcasted, but it might have been the day that we sat down and got together. I think I lost one of my DPNs for a little bit and took a pause. So I think I would have thought that I'd have these finished by now, but I didn't work on them for quite a bit of time. But I'm currently working on finishing a pair of 2x2 just plain vanilla socks. And I'll hold them up. I am using Coast to Coast Classic Sock in the color What in the 8 Hells is Coffee, which is a really nice dark brown that's got a little bit of tonality to it, a little bit of like different shades of brown throughout, but makes just a really nice classic neutral sock. And I was heavily inspired by you making a pair of ribbed socks out of this yarn, but you followed a pattern and I am just winging it. They look really skinny because they haven't been blocked yet, but that's what ribbed socks do, so
yeah,
it's okay.
It'll get better.
Yeah, they look really nice on, or at least this one does. This one is still very much a work in progress. I heavily debated what kind of heel construction to do because I am a heel flap and gusset fan, but I've seen so many people do ribbed socks where they do a short row heel, and I don't hate a short row heel. It's not like something that bothers me or anything. I think I just honestly prefer the experience of knitting a heel flap and gusset as opposed to the short rows. So I ended up going with that, and the only thing that I did that I don't know if is fully standard was that when I reconnected in the round, I did pick up an extra stitch and then knit it together with one of the stitches already on the needle, so that way I didn't feel like I got a hole right here. Because sometimes when I do a short row heel, when it reconnects, it's like right there that sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of a gap. And I think that picking up a little stitch helps connect that and not make that so apparent, or I feel like I didn't get a hole. But other than that, I'm really just doing a pretty simple pair of socks. There's nothing too fancy about it, but I like having those kinds in my wardrobe.
Speaking of your coast to coast yarn, I was really fortunate this past week. My husband and me took a trip to Wichita. So the team that he works on is primarily based out of Wichita, and then he's one of the more like remote folks. They do have an office here, so he does go into the office, but like when he does, it's not like he sees his whole team. His team is all there pretty much. So it was a good opportunity for us to like go down and have him spend a day in the office with people that he actually works with, and we had a retirement party for one of his coworkers, so that was real sweet. But while I was in Wichita, I was like, okay, we have to go to coast to coast.
I'm so jealous.
I did go without you.
I was a little hurt.
I felt a little bad, but it was really fun to go in and see the little shop, and I did pick up a couple of skeins. So while I was there, I did pick up 2 skeins of pigeon milk in the classic sock, which is 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon. And then I also got in the same base a skein of the Lights Out colorway. So I'm planning on pairing these two together to make a Friday tee by PetiteKnit, with the pigeon milk being the main color and then the stripes being this like almost black color. It does have a slight variegation, but it's pretty solid. So I think those two are going to be really cute together. I'm really excited about it. I do think I'm going to need a little extra than just two skeins, but because I've already knit a pair of socks out of this, I have maybe like 40 grams of an extra skein left over, so I'm not too worried about it. I know, I figured you would have some too if I like start to really run out. But yeah, it was really fun to just go and look at all the yarn. She had quite a bit of her own colorways, and then there was some knitting for Olive and a couple of other brands. And I got to talk to Erin, so it was really sweet to meet her in person. It's always kind of fun when you feel like you know someone on Instagram and then you actually get to meet them in real life and chat, and she was super sweet. So we need to plan another day here soon where you can go down to. And it was really cute. The area that the shop is in has it's kind of like a rectangle where all the businesses are on the outside, and then the inside has like a sitting area. There were a bunch of like little patio tables and stuff like that, and there was a coffee shop next door to it. So I think in the springtime it would be really fun to go on like a really nice day where we can go and look at yarn and grab some coffee and then sit out on the patio area and knit for a little bit and hang out. So hopefully we can make that happen one of these days, but very excited to start on this project one of these days. I might wait another month or two and do this a little bit closer to when it's actually going to be warm weather for a t-shirt, but I think it'll be really cute.
I love it. I think it's going to be really adorable. I have one acquisition, and this one was kindly gifted to me, or I think to us, but we decided that I think
it's going to live with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I've already got a interchangeable needle set and you have not invested yet.
So I feel like I've kind of gone on a journey with my needles, and I need to figure out like a better long-term solution for it. But just for some context, we've both been knitting since we were in like second grade when our mom taught us when we were real young. And so for a really long time, like growing up, we would just use, you know, whatever she had or whatever like relatives would give us, or that we would get at like Michael's or Joann's or whatever like
was. It was just sporadic, like whatever was available is what we used, and we didn't.
It's a very eclectic, like, grouping of needles. We weren't, like, brand
I don't think we developed a preference or realized that needles can affect the experience until we got, like, super into it in college.
Yeah.
In high school and before, we would just pick it up, and whatever we had was what we did. So,
yeah. So in college, when we started getting into garment knitting, I really didn't have the funds to purchase like a $200 needle set. Like that just wasn't going to happen at that time in my life. And so I would just buy one-off needles for the projects that I needed. And so long term, that didn't really make sense. But at the time, it was a lot easier to spend $30 on needles for a project than it was to invest like $200+ for something that would go a lot longer. And so over the years, I've just collected pretty much all the needles that I need. It's pretty rare that I buy needles at this point, but almost all of them are just the like set, you know, not the interchangeable. They're just like the single, you know, 16-inch cable with size 7 or what, you know, like it's they're all the like what is the word? I'm sure there's a word for
like set instead of interchangeable, I think.
Yeah, like the single-use needle.
Yes.
If that makes sense. I mean, you can use it for a lot. Like, you can use the longer ones for, like, magic loop and other things. Like, but yeah, like, long story short, I don't have a set of interchangeable needles. And at this point, I feel like I have all the needles that I need. It's not that often that I find myself having to buy or replace a pair of needles. And almost all of them are Chiagu. But you were in kind of a different place.
Yeah.
Because I think you were just using my needles for a long time, and so it made sense for you to just get your own set to begin with.
So I have a good accumulation of needles too. Like I was kind of building my collection a little bit slower. I feel like you had more. But what actually got me was I got into a test knit at one point. This was years ago. I don't even know that I remember what the name of the pattern was, but I remember it was on US 11 10 and 11 needles. Like, it was a much bigger gauge than I had a lot of needles to work with. And I don't think you did either. I went to the store and picked out all of the needles that I was going to need for this pattern, because at the time I didn't have any needles that would work with this pattern. And by the time I had every single needle, it was coming out to like $80 or $90, I think, which was just at the time so much money for one pattern. And the store people were not pressury, but they were like, hey, if you're planning on spending this much money anyway, like, you might as well get this full set that's going to give you so much more value. And I don't know, just like explained what I'm getting versus what I would get. And it was a very impulsive decision, but I bought an interchangeable needle set that day. And honestly, I have no regrets, because I do really like that. And I feel like I have not bought a lot of needles since then either, except for I do lose needles on occasion. So that is a problem in my life. But anyway, all of that is to say,
long story short,
that is why we decided to give me this binder
Yes.
and not Jessica. But we don't talk about needles a lot on here, I feel like, anyway. So it is kind of nice to share those thoughts out loud. Anyway, so the super kind people at Thread and Maple gifted us this beautiful leather binder that has several pages for needles, notions, and just general needle and knitting organizing, which has been so lovely. I actually waited for Jessica to come over for us to open it together, so I haven't put all of my stuff in here yet, but it has like a little magnet fastening, and then they gifted 3 pages. So I think this one is the cables, like the interchangeable cable organizer. I think this is the DPN organizer, because we like to knit socks. And this one I think is going to be the Chiagu interchangeable. So I haven't put everything in there to figure out if that's exactly right, but I'm super excited to spend some time today getting all of my stuff in here and getting to enjoy this really beautiful, beautiful piece that I just can't even believe I have right now, because it's so pretty.
It also came with this teeny tiny little notions holder, and so it has just like the tiniest little scissors that are so cute, and a couple of tapestry needles. So we just thought that was really adorable and a really cute way to hold all of those things. And then there's a little zipper on the outside in case you want to hold like stitch markers or anything like that. In fact, they already included several just little round silver guys, so they're very cute.
It was such a nice gift, so we're so appreciative, and definitely excited to share this with everyone, and we'll have a link in our description too. They didn't ask us to share anything in specific, they just gifted it to us, but it's really nice to be able to share a really beautiful product like this.
The last acquisition that I have is the Sandus Garn booklet. So I'll hold it up so hopefully you can see the cover. I ordered this from, I believe it was Statement Yarn Junkie, and they're a shop in Canada. So when I saw that they had it in stock, I just went ahead and jumped on it, because a lot of the times with these booklets, they can be really hard to get your hands on, especially after like a lot of stores have started selling out, and a lot of stores do require that you purchase a sweater quantity of yarn with the booklet. But this store didn't require that, so I went ahead and purchased just the book. And it's primarily colorwork sweaters. So I'll hold up an example of like this cardigan. And a lot of the sweaters in this booklet come with both a men's and a women's version, which I think is really nice, because that way if I want to knit different variations of it, I can. Here's another one that I thought was just absolutely beautiful. It has this color work all throughout, and then a lot of detail at the top. So I really enjoyed just looking through this. I don't necessarily have plans right now to make anything. Like, I haven't ordered yarn to go with any of these patterns, but I do think they're really beautiful, and hopefully one of these days I'll get around to making some of these. But just wanted to grab that while I could find a copy, because sometimes they're hard to find later on.
We will end with sewing here, and we know some people are really just here for the knitting, so if you are, we so appreciate you being here. But we have, I think, 3 finished objects in the sewing category. I finished 1 and you finished 2, is that right?
Yep.
So do you want to start yours and then we'll alternate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll talk about my daisy frock first. So this is a pattern by Lydia Naomi, and I used just a bed sheet that I found at a thrift store that I thought was cute. It had a cute pattern, so we'll put videos of me wearing it up, but it's just a really cute sundress type look. I thought the floral pattern was really cute and girly, and this pattern's a little bit different than some of the other elasticated waist dresses because it has like a band across the front that almost makes it look like you're wearing like a top and a skirt. So I thought that detail was really cute. But as with the other Lydia Naomi patterns that I've made before, I found them really easy to follow. She has video tutorials that make it really nice. So didn't really run into any issues or anything like that. I did have one moment where I didn't do the bottom of the like top part hem correctly and had to undo all of that, but that was purely me not reading the instructions correctly and skipping a step, not because they weren't clear. Once I realized I missed a step, it was pretty obvious that I did. So yeah, really like this pattern. I think I did lengthen the skirt by about 3 inches too, and I fully lined everything. So her instructions call for a lining of the bodice, but then I also lined the skirt just because with it being a bed sheet and thrifted, I didn't want it to be too thin and potentially see-through or anything. But that was a really easy modification to just add a lining to the skirt.
The sewing pattern that I made recently was the Henrietta skirt by Spaghetti Western Sewing, and was very heavily inspired by a make that you have done before and might be wearing right now. But you're wearing your version, and I've made my own version now of that pattern. So it's a very simple skirt that's got these kind of gathers at the side to give it like a little extra volume on the side, which I think is just such a cute detail. And I made it with Blackbird Fabrics To Go Cotton Linen Blend, which is a fabric that I've used before and really like. I think that it's really nice for something that can gather but has a tiny bit of structure to it. It definitely gives it like a little bit of volume, which I really like. And honestly, this pattern I think is really easy. Like, I would recommend it for people that are looking for a good first or second pattern because it really isn't too technical and it always gives really cute results. I feel like every time I've seen it, it just looks so cute and kind of modern.
The two that I've made are like 2 of my most worn skirts. I wear them all the time. Really love them.
I see myself making it in so many patterns and colors. I want a gingham one really bad. I haven't gotten to it yet, but it's just one of my favorites. I think it's a really cute design.
And she has updated the pattern too, but I don't think either of us have tried it with the updated version. So the one that we've used is kind of like she gives you like the bare bones of like, here's what the top of the panel is shaped like, and then you just like measure yourself the rest of the way. And I think now she's updated it to give you more like big block patterns, so that way if you don't want to eyeball or measure yourself, you've got something to like directly lay on top of the fabric and do it that way.
So to explain that, that's when you're like cutting out the fabric that you if you have the old version like we do, you would really be cutting it out on your own without following a piece. But she's since updated it so that if you want an exact pattern piece to lay out and cut directly on the pattern piece, that you can do that now. So it really is nice for both preferences, I think. I think some people do prefer to kind of be able to have more freedom and cut out what they want and what works for them. And then if I was starting out, I would probably want that structure of a guided piece. So yeah, really nice pattern. I really love all of her designs.
So the last project that I'll talk about today is a Zamora skirt that I made recently. So this is, I think, the 3rd time that I've made this pattern. It's by Madwig Studio, and previously I've made a white one, and then I've also made a blue one. But there were several times recently where I just found myself wanting a basic black skirt to wear. So decided to go ahead and make another one. And for this one, I used Cotton Poplin by Matchy Matchy Sewing Club. So it's just a really cute skirt. I think it's a dupe of a Doan skirt, the Sebastian skirt that's very popular. But the Madwig Studio Zamora skirt version uses an elasticated waistband, which makes it really easy and quick to sew up and really easy to just wear every day and throw on under anything. So I'm really liking it, and I think it'll be really cute with my Christy Dawn inspired sweater when all is said and done. I'm hoping that those two will go together and be really cute.
I love that.
So we'll see. I'll let you know how that goes. But I am really happy with the skirt. Like I said, very basic pattern that I've made before, but sometimes it's kind of nice to go back to those projects and just have a nice simple sew.
I think that's all that we have to share today, but definitely felt like a lot. We would absolutely love to hear what you've been working on, what things have been inspiring you. If you're joining the Stornoway Sweater Squad, that's been super exciting to hear from some people, and just generally what you've enjoyed recently.
Thanks so much for being here, especially if you've made it this far. We really appreciate it.